right, we've got a special one for you today. And by the way, if you notice, we are keeping the original intro, thanks to everybody who helped me to decide on that. Overwhelmingly, the majority of people liked the original intro for whatever reason, but we're keeping it. So what we're going to do today is a special video similar to my previous video, which I will put a link to, and that is covering some of my favorite tools that I just feel like I cannot live without. And these will be tools that are not necessarily diagnostics related like you would expect on our do-it-yourself automotive diagnostics channel here, but these are tools that any weekend warrior or wrencher is gonna really wish that they had in their toolbox, and there will be too many to get at one time. So we're also gonna talk about some tool buying philosophies as well, so that we can help you keep your checkbook under control as you see all of these amazing things. In this video, I'm going to try to focus more on tools that you probably didn't even know existed. So that'll add a little bit of twist to it. One final note, I am not compensated for any of these tools or by any companies represented here at all. These are strictly my own tools that I paid for my own collection that I just find really, really useful, and I'm just sharing it with you. I am not compensated in any way. I hate nothing more than shameless promotion. All right. What? Let's get to work. All right, first tool I'm going to show you is an air tool, which I very seldom use air tools anymore. But this is an Astro 1834 impact gun with very flat, low profile. As you can see, this will be useful if you have ever had to remove the harmonic balancer on a longitudinal engine, and your typical air or battery impact gun like this will never fit on that harmonic balancer bolt, the crankshaft bolt, with the radiator in the way, so you have to remove the radiator. Well, with this guy here, you can slip that in after removing the fan between the balancer and the radiator, get that bolt off. It saves you a couple of hours on your job by not having to remove a radiator if you're doing like front cover or timing job or something like that. Now, this type of tool gets into exactly my particular tool philosophy, because I know there's a lot out there. One that I hear an awful lot is it is better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. And I believe, especially for a do-it-yourselfer like myself, that is a horrible philosophy, absolutely horrible. And actually, I think it's a horrible philosophy even for a professional for several reasons. First of all, the idea that it is better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it assumes that the tool is needed. If you think about it, very few tools are needed. You can always get around it some way, but it'll take you a hell of a lot more time usually. And thus the reason for my philosophy that I buy tools that will save me time. I'm a lot more time conscientious now. I have spent most of my time working around things without exactly the right tool, but you can always do it. It just takes a lot more time. But it's very seldom that you cannot do something unless you have the particular tool. So keep that in mind. Therefore, something like this, where I have many, many times run into where I have to remove that radiator, and I'm thinking to myself, if there was a way I could do this without removing the radiator, this would save me time repeatedly, again and again and again. Then I start looking and researching, I find something like this, and now I save 2 hours every time I'm doing a job like that. That's kind of more the philosophy. The other problem with the very popular better to have it and not need it philosophy is that you will never end, ever. There are always going to be tools that you will look at and say, well, better to have it and not need it, and you will just run yourself dry. I am definitely not the kind of guy that's going to just mass all of these tools that I'm never going to use. I don't have the space for it. I really am not that kind of guy that's going to spend like $15,000 on a big Snap-on box full of Snap-on. The box itself would be $15,000. I am more of like a gear wrench level kind of a guy. A little bit above the Harbor Freight, actually a lot above most of the Harbor Freight. Although Harbor Freight has improved quite a bit. As a matter of fact, this air gun that I showed you here, this impact gun, is a Harbor Freight Earthquake. There is also the big, 3/4 inch one that I sometimes use as well. These are one of those Harbor Freight purchases that if you buy, it will be as good as anything out there and last forever. I've had those for years. But I really think you would do well to kind of keep your tool philosophy a little more in check. Another thing, if you're going to have it and not need it, is you're going to have a lot of storage space because you're never going to end. So I think my philosophy works better. So a perfect example of that is this next tool over here, which I'm pretty sure you didn't know existed. Okay, what the hell is this thing? Well, let me get this out of the way and show you. This is a mug with my logo that you can get on my merch store. But this here is what's called a drill press block plate. And it's not for a drill press, for me at least. What this does is allows you to minimize one of the most frustrating and time-consuming experiences you can possibly have, and that is pressing the wheel bearings out of a press-fit steering knuckle. A lot of the Toyotas have that, like Toyota Corollas, things like that, Toyota trucks, where those wheel hub assemblies are pressed in instead of bolted in. Something like this. And then you go over to your press over here. This, by the way, is a 12-ton Harbor Freight Pittsburgh shop press that has done me well for like 8 years now, and I beat the hell out of this thing. But one of the things is I've got all these adapters and washers and all these things so you can precariously try to balance that awkward, odd-shaped steering knuckle perfectly straight to be able to press your bearings out, and it always slips off, falls off. You can never get it adjusted exactly level ever. And I've done that enough where I have literally spent over an hour trying to press the stupid bearing out, the whole time just trying to configure that steering knuckle on this press. Well, what this kit does is it allows you to space out your steering knuckle and get those uneven edges wherever you may want them, taller and shorter. And it doesn't have to just be for steering knuckles, for any odd-shaped item that you want to get on there so it's perfectly level. And these things are incredibly strong. They do not bend. And let me show you a picture of what I'm talking about. Something like this, where that awkward steering knuckle can be perfectly adjusted to be exactly level with your press and push that hub and bearing out. As you can see, it's surprisingly inexpensive at only $100. This pays for itself the very first time you use it and then some. All right, now I know what a lot of you are thinking. Many of you are familiar that there is another tool by OTC that has a bunch of adapters you use in conjunction with your impact gun, your air battery impact gun, and it allows you to remove those bearing and hub assemblies from those vehicles while the knuckle is still in the car. And I'm well familiar with that. I have one. The difference with this is a couple things. First of all, when I do this job, I like to remove the entire assembly because I also replace the ball joints typically as well. And it's a lot easier for a do-it-yourselfer if you're on jack stands, or I've got quick jacks. If you're not at a good, comfortable working height and you're doing all this, it's really bad on your back. So I like to do everything on my workbench where it's at chest level and just a lot better for my health. The other thing with it is that tool is not necessarily just for steering knuckles. You can use it on other applications as well. So it has a lot of versatility to it. So again, matter of personal preference, I really prefer this way a lot better. I just think it's a lot easier on my back given my elderly years now. All right, let's take a look at another tool. All right, if you do any kind of suspension work ever, you will know exactly what this is. This is an inner tie rod removal tool. It's got all these adapters here where you basically get the outer tie rod end off, you slip the tube all the way over the tie rod after also removing the inner boot as well. You got these locks on here and you use your ratchet to remove it. And this is not what I'm showing you because that is stupid. Believe it or not, this here is my inner tie rod removal tool. I no longer use this. I have not used this in years because every application I've ever run into, I just simply bolt this little U-joint gizmo here right over the inner tie rod end and secure it up nice and snug. Use my ratchet here and just spin it right off, maybe with a really long extension or something. I have not yet run into an application where this little guy hasn't worked. Again, I'm lazy. I'm not going to research every one of these tools that I have and what it is. There's lots and lots of companies that make this thing, but this is my go-to for removing inner tie rod ends over this bulky, complex kit that takes up all kinds of room. All right, actually, I just went to my Buy It Again page real quick. So this is it right here, $12. 12 freaking dollars for this thing. And let me show you an application for it. Okay, here's a little video of it. You see it just goes right over that inner tie rod end, and you just use long extension and just spin it right off. Not the greatest picture there. Maybe that's a little better. Like that. All right, let's talk about some electrical stuff here because we do a lot of electrical on this channel, as my viewers well know. And in my last video, I got kind of a little bit of feedback about cutting a wire as a test to show that there was an issue with a PCM. A lot of people brought up, why didn't you just de-pin the wire from the PCM connector? And actually I did, but I didn't have the right fitting to be able to de-pin the wire, and I just didn't show it on camera because it was kind of cumbersome. And I was really afraid that I was going to more damage the connection permanently than anything else. It was just safer to cut the wire, prove the concept, and then resolder and repair. Thus the reason for buying this. While cutting a wire and repairing it is absolutely no big deal or anything, I do agree that it's probably less than professional. So I bought this, which is a complete terminal repair and removal kit. If I can't find the right tool out of this kit here to de-pin a terminal, then part of the problem with this is it's still going to take me longer to de-pin because of finding the right tool out of all of these choices. But I agree, it is a more professional thing. It also comes with some extra pins. I also have lots and lots of other extra pins for different applications as well. I just keep the main ones in here with the kit. All right, so now no more cutting wires. We're going to de-pin them. I hope you're happy. All right, if I do need to do wire repair, this has always been my go-to wire stripper. I think everybody is familiar with these. This is still my favorite wire stripper by far. But many times you run into the situation where you just don't have enough wire here to be able to get your cutter on there, so you end up using some manual cutter or something like that. Well, that's where this guy comes in. This wire cutter here is adjustable and fits over the end of the wire. The other nice thing I like about it is it's self-adjusting, and just take it and you see you can make even the smallest, tiniest removal of a wire. That's going to be useless right there. Of course, I would never do that. But we can get it to something a little more reasonable there. You see, again, it self-adjusts and gives you a perfect, nice strip there on the end of the wire every time. Really, really great tool to have. Now, of course, we're going to put a butt connector on that wire. And this is the tool that I typically use for that. It's this Wirefy right here, and this is a professional crimp tool. You can see it's a little bit intimidating looking, but we get that over the end there, squeeze it down, release, and you see what it does is it puts that professional crimp that you see from factory onto your butt connectors like that there. So the Wirefy right here. This is also adjustable too. You can make tighter or looser crimps if you've got different brands of connectors, for example. So it's not universally set for your red, blue, and yellow like other tools are. You can fine adjust this. All right, with everything digitized now, more and more I find that I've got to use my scope to diagnose electrical issues, and there's a lot of times where I want to use the scope on a engine sensor while I drive the vehicle. Obviously, I don't want my scope equipment in the engine bay while I'm driving a vehicle, so you got to have some long wires to run them through the passenger compartment of the car to have your setup. And that's where these come in. These are really, really handy. These are 10-foot long retractable test leads. Just make sure if you get this, you pull them both out at the same time. Don't just pull one side or it gets tangled up. And then this one is a really cheap one. I have to manually spin it back in to retract. There are others that are spring loaded, but this is a really must-have if you do a lot of electrical. I love this thing. All right, here's another electrical gizmo that I really underrepresent on the channel, but I do use this all the time. I really like this because it does a couple things. It allows me, first of all, the obvious thing is it brings that DLC port to you instead of working under the dashboard if you want to check voltages on your networks, things like that, check your power supply. If you want an easily accessible power supply and ground for checks, that allows you to do it. The other thing I like about this too is you don't have to sacrifice your scan tool in order to use this because it has this adapter out here where you can still connect your scan tool and be able to look at differences when you use your scan tool at the same time as looking at your direct electrical configurations and stuff. Really like this thing. By the way, for you guys who are regulars on my channel and you subscribe on my website, I'm going to give you guys a little special tip here. This is just a basic breakout box. Really, for all practical purposes, this is just about having your connections right here in front of you. There are some very complex breakout boxes which will allow you all kinds of controls and stuff like that. But what I was going to show you guys is you extra for experts out there. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and check this network real quick. And of course, you know what we're expecting here. We're going to be looking for 60 ohms because we got the pair of 120 ohm resistors in parallel there on our networks. We know all that. And I want to show you, I no longer do this. So this is actually not a good test anymore. So as you see, we've got our 60 ohms there, and you're going to say, okay, good. My wiring integrity on my CAN network is good. What I want to point out is since that release of that video, this is no longer a viable test because a lot of cars I'm running into now have different configurations where they may either have multiple resistors on each termination in sequence, which changes this. And there are others where we don't have those in parallel circuit and we've got kind of more of a star circuit setup. So reading 120 ohms very well not only may be a correct reading, but it doesn't check the whole network. So for you guys that follow the channel along, I wanted to take this opportunity to correct on that. I no longer do this method until I look at a network diagram first and confirm that the design is compatible with testing in this manner. All right, this will probably be the most unnecessary tool that I will show in this video, but I just had to go ahead and get this thing because, again, the time savings factor. What this is actually a combination of a couple of kits that I have. I like to consolidate a lot of my stuff into my own kits. And that way, whenever I'm doing a job, I just kind of have everything that I need with me without having to bring multiple cases. I actually hate blow mold cases. I hate these. They're bulky. They take up a lot of room. So what I usually do is I cut the guts out of them and I try to pack as many things as I can into it to consolidate space and room as I can. And what this is, a lot of you guys are familiar, this is a U-Activate and something that you wouldn't expect me to get on this channel. This is a little bit expensive, but it's the time savings of this. And by the way, if you're not familiar, what this is sort of like an ultimate relay testing tool. So you've got your port in the back here, and you can have all of these relay adapters that will connect in. So virtually any relay port that you're trying to test and look at your load and control sides on your relays, you can connect up to this tool. And as you see, it gives you access to the load and control sides for measuring voltage. It will also show you the activity on the terminals here. You can activate the load side or control side with this button. Now, everything that you do here, we showed for 10 years how to do all of this stuff using a paper clip, pretty much for the most part, and your DVOM and whatever. Being able to just connect right into the relay and have all your controls right here is such a time saver. The other thing that I really, really like about this is it has this amp loop here that you can just put your amp clamp right over, measure your amperage. This is just so great for things like, I don't know, like testing a fuel pump circuitry and stuff like that. This allows you actually to much easier test the entire circuitry. Now I've got some other things from another cheaper kit that I had before, which would just allow me to basically directly connect in when we pull one of these out. It's kind of a handy thing to have too. It's a little lesser version where basically I can just pop right into a relay and it just gives me access to the load and controlled side ports there. Very easily. This is especially helpful if you've got those relays that have the skirt around them so that you can't fit wires or probes under there. So really, really just about time savings on this one, but definitely not one of those need tools, because anything you do with this, you really can pretty much do with a paper clip and a DVOM. All right, now I'm going to show you a tool that I absolutely love and use all the time that you will never get. And that is this. This is actually one of the most useful things I have. You can see we got a little alligator grippy at the end there. And it looks very, very simple like this, but this is actually a laparoscopic forceps. Why in the world do I have that? Well, as most of you guys know, my real job is actually as a scientist. And back in the day, I used to do a lot of animal surgeries on pigs and dogs as part of the projects that we were doing, particularly with heart and lung. But something happened in the autoclave and the handle broke here. And so we discarded it, and I was like, no, I think I can use this. Man, this thing is so useful for picking up like drop nuts and bolts, but also if you need to fit like a wire terminal back onto a ground or something like that and you can't quite reach it, this grips really strong. And you can fit wires and connect connectors and things like that. Man, just so many applications for this thing. Believe it or not, this thing costs about $500. Obviously, I'm sure you could find some really long forceps or something like that. But the thing that really differentiates this is how it works with this thin tube here that doesn't expand like pliers do, so you can get this into the most extreme tight places. But anyway, if you got $500 laying around, you can buy a surgical laparoscopic forceps here. All right, previously I showed you my Knipex pliers. I love my Knipex pliers, but I didn't show you that odd locking plier kind of thing. So this is, I don't know what it is. Doesn't have a name on it. Cheap Chinese brand, definitely for sure. But the reason I got this is because, all right, so where this comes in is on the stabilizer bar end links here. And you know exactly where I'm going with this, right? You go to remove that nut there, but the problem is the link is worn, so it just spins and spins and spins and spins. Typically, you can fit an Allen key on the end of this and manually use a wrench to walk it off while keeping that bolt still for you there. Well, that's where this guy comes in. So basically, this fits perfectly over that end of the bolt before it goes into the ball and socket joint, and you can clamp that down and then just use your impact to zip that nut right off. Huge time saver right there. A lot of you guys are familiar with these, called a finger ratchet. Of course, you got that thing you're reaching up into a tight spot, maybe blind under a dashboard. You feel the head of the nut, but there's no way you can get a ratchet in there or a wrench, so you use this. But the trouble is, this bolt is too tight for you to loosen with your finger ratchet, so this becomes useless. And thus this little bitty, tiny, cute little ratchet. Look at how adorable that is. And that allows you to get that leverage on it because your hand is still in there, right? And you can just feel that it's on there and use the ratchet to loosen it. And then it's actually quicker to just spin it off with your finger ratchet. All right, probably the thing I hate doing more than anything else is suspension work. I just hate the whole wrenching thing. I met a guy recently who's like, what are you talking about? I love nothing better than having to beat stuff up with a big hammer and beating the crap out of it, breaking it apart. I am the exact opposite of that. I hate that. So of course you're always using tools like this to remove those ball joints that just won't come out. And every one of these has the same problems. They never really exactly fit, so you need a whole set of these things to fit for different ball joints. The other thing, if you don't get it perfectly lined up, it keeps wanting to pull off center all the time. And then the other thing, of course, is that these things are always too wide and they always damage the boot on the ball joint. So if you're not replacing the ball joint, you're just separating the knuckle or something like that. That always causes damage. This is as opposed to, of course, the pickle fork, which if you're going to use the pickle fork, you're going to be replacing that ball joint because you're going to damage it every time. And thus, this tool. So if we look here, this has really thin but super strong teeth here, the fork here, that you get on there, and it won't damage the boot. It goes right under the boot without damaging it like these thicker ones do. And you just tighten this up really good, give it a couple whacks with the sledgehammer. Ball joint comes out really easy and without damaging it. Yeah, I absolutely hate any kind of suspension work, which is also why I got this little gizmo here. This thing is so awesome. This is for when you've got the shock absorber, that the round bottom end of the shock press fits into that knuckle, and then you've got the bolt that tightens it up. And when you remove that bolt, that shock is just so pressed in there, you have to get maybe a chisel or something to separate. Let me see if I can find a picture of what I'm talking about. Okay, so not this design where the strut just bolts to the knuckle with a couple of bolts here, but this design right here. It looks like this guy's trying to do some type of homemade thing. Let's see if we can get a better picture of this. All right, there, like that, where that strut just fits right through the knuckle here, and then it pinches closed with a bolt. Looks like this guy's trying to feed a bolt in there to separate that out, which of course is just going to chew that all up and everything. That's where this guy comes in. You just fit him in there and then turn the bolt and just spread that out. You only need to do it just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, not even like that. And that's what this tool is for. Again, all about time savings here. And also, I'm going to argue this is really excellent because you're not going to damage your knuckle like doing something like this, or what I used to do is drive a chisel or something down and hammer the chisel in there trying to separate it out. This does it without doing damage. Ever try to remove a pressed-on harmonic balancer with one of these 3-jaw pullers? That's a fun experience where you get any 2 of these to hook up to the spokes on the harmonic balancer, and then this third one, when you move it on there, this one falls off, and you do this ad nauseum. You know exactly what I'm talking about. So especially on those GM harmonic balancers like that. So this tool right here just eliminates all that. You just simply screw it right in. All these are perfectly measured to lock into place, and then just turn your bolt to pull off that pressed on harmonic balancer. How genius is that? All right, you know what might be fun? What might be fun is showing some tools that look like you wouldn't be able to live without them. And I fell for it, and I was a sucker, and I did the, hey, better to have and not need it, and never used it even once. So I'm going to show you a couple of those. I think that might actually be fun. So let's take a look in this drawer. All right, so these, by the way, I use all the time. These are some of my favorite go-tos. These are some DURATECH. I've also got a couple of gear wrenches in here. These long box end ratcheting wrenches. Now again, as I mentioned in the previous video, if you can pull it off, I really recommend that you get the ones with the flip switch to change directions so that you prevent getting into that thing that you back up the bolt and realize you're up against a firewall or something and now you're stuck because you can't reverse it because you can't remove the wrench. So I really recommend those, but these I use all the time. This I don't. So this I saw on Eric the Car Guy. I know a lot of you guys are like, what am I doing watching Eric the Car Guy? That was before I really got into all this and everything, and I used to watch bolt spin videos, and which I very quickly got bored of. But I saw him review this, and I thought, well, that is something that would come in really handy. I have never once used this thing, never even once. The idea with this, you can remove that there, is that you've got a really hard to reach bolt way down here, right? And you can't reach it. Maybe it's for a timing cover or something. I think I saw it on. So you just put your thing on there with your socket, and then you can turn the bolt by turning this guy up here. And as we see, if we turn the top one, the bottom one turns in the same direction, and that allows you to get to these really impossible to reach fasteners. I've never used it once, never even once. The worst part of it is when I bought this tool, freaking Amazon, they do that thing where you may also like this. And of course I saw these double S wrenches like that. I thought, well, I definitely will need something like that. At least these have the reversible switch. I have all these applications where I think this will be the perfect tool. I go, I grab it, and it's no better than my straight wrench. It just never has come in handy. Now, on the other hand, these half moon wrenches I do use from time to time. These have come in really handy. This and these, I am convinced, are just gimmicks. All right, this next one I'm embarrassed to show you. I'm literally embarrassed to show this, but this is so embarrassing, but it's going to show my age. But when you get older, you just really get to be about simplicity and ease, and you will just sometimes spend money just to make things that are just slightly frustrating just even a little bit easier, and it's worth every goddamn penny, I'm telling you. And that's what these are. So this is when you've got the European cars with those wheels that instead of having lug studs coming out of the wheel hub assembly, you've got the lug bolts that go in. So you're lining up the wheel, and you got to line it up exactly on there and hold it in position while you just get one of those lug bolts to line up in there. And once you get it, you're good to go. And what these are is these are just adapters that you can just screw these right in. There's different sizes for any foreign vehicle like that. And you just screw this right into the wheel hub and then slip the wheel right over it. They come in pairs, so you can do two of them. I get by with just one, really. And then it just holds that wheel perfectly in place for you while you line up your bolts. I know. Once again, these are tools I can't live without. You can probably live without them. All right, we're going to close out with just one final one. This one is so simple, and this looks like something that would be a total gimmick, but oh my God, this thing works so amazing. This is a tool to remove the exhaust hangers. So those rubber exhaust hangers that they go over that little metal nipple, and you can put them on real easy, but when you try to take them off, it's nearly impossible. You just get this behind the rubber, get that onto the metal nipple, squeeze it together. It just comes off like butter. It is the most amazing thing. This tool is one of those tools that you would look at and go, I'm not buying that. This is such a gimmick. Man, I can't live without this thing. That's such a great tool. Huge time saver. And also it prevents damaging those rubber mounts too, as opposed to trying to get it off with a pick or prying it off with a screwdriver or whatever you guys may be doing. This takes it off in just one squeeze. Amazing. All right, guys, well, that'll conclude this video. I know that a lot of you guys like these kind of videos, but we'll maybe do one more because, quite honestly, I'm kind of running out of tools to show you. I don't really have that much else to show you. That's pretty much the extent of it. But I do have a few other tricks up my sleeve that I'll share for maybe one more video in the future. So if you like this, let me know by liking the video. Hopefully you subscribe. Leave a comment on which tools you had to go to Amazon and buy as a result of this video. That's always entertaining. And we will catch you next time. Thanks for watching. And you just screw this right...